Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, From Gut Feeling to Granular Insight, Physician-Level Data in Action, presented by OptimizeRx, CMI Media Group, and Fierce Pharma. I'm John, and I'll be your host for today. Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes for everyone. To learn more about our speakers, just visit the speaker bio window on your screen. Additional resources can be found in the handouts window on your screen. If you accidentally close one of these windows, you can reopen it by clicking on its name in the top navigation bar. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours. And there will be a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar, so feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Submit Questions window. And now I'd like to introduce Seth Chaney, Senior Director, Commercial Enablement at OptimizeRx, who will be moderating this discussion today. Seth, over to you.
Thanks so much, John. Seth Chaney, as John mentioned, new member to OptimizeRx, coming from a decade of working inside pharma. And my background is biomedical informatics and digital health cloud infrastructure, and most recently working with launching cardiometabolic brands and overseeing their kind of brand management and market. I'm joined today with Assia Abada, and she is a two-time Data IQ Most Influential Top 100 Persons winner, and she's the EVP of Business Insights at CMI, and she recently led a team of innovators, including data scientists, engineers, and developers to execute on decision support solutions. As well, we have Karin Hayes, who is the EVP of Insights and Analytics at OptimizeRx. She is a recent recipient of the 2024 PM 360 Elite 100 Award, and she is my co-collaborator on the PLD white paper that we'll mention. So the basic structure of the way that we've kind of formulated this presentation is to build on essentially on the structure that we had of really using and activating your PLD, getting the applications of that PLD, measurement frameworks, competitive benchmarking, predictive analytics on top of that once you've set that foundation, and integrating into an omni-channel where you get those data and insights about what's driving your response. We'll go ahead and transition into essentially our first question here that's going to drive. I want to pass it to you, Karin. What makes physician-level data different from other HCP data types, and why does it matter more now than ever?
Thanks for the question, Seth. For those of you who may not have read our white paper yet, I would suggest that you do. But when we talk about PLD, what we mean is that it is campaign impressions aligned to the physician, specifically linked to the NPI of the physician, and it will include data on the channel and also tactic for that particular promotion. So very useful physician-level promotional data. A couple things to note. First, since the data is tagged and resolved to the NPI, it can be combined with other insights to really understand prescriber characteristics, as well as diagnostic treatment patterns, most importantly used to measure campaign performance and ROI, as well as to optimize campaigns. One last consideration or uniqueness of PLD is that it is often aggregated or de-identified and not available at the physician level from every provider of or vendor for campaign activation. And this is really, really important and a tremendous advantage when you can get the campaign data back at this physician level, especially since in our case, we are able to activate and link to nearly 800,000 different physicians in EHR, as well as even more in digital promotion. And why is it more important than ever to have this information or be growing in importance? Particularly because pharmaceutical companies are being asked to determine return on investment, and really money for promotion is further scrutinized. And I think all of us want to ensure that programs are not only effective, but that we understand why that they're effective.
That's fantastic, Karin. I'll go to you for this next one as well. What do you see the biggest disconnect between PLD's potential and how it's being used today inside pharma companies?
I think one of the biggest disconnects is that many of our clients use PLD, of course, to look at impressions, which doctors actually saw the campaign or were exposed to the campaign, and then they look at clicks. And one observation is that clicks aren't always relevant to promotion. Sometimes they may reflect, but a lot of times they don't really reflect the actual health outcomes. In other words, what does that physician behavior, or how does that physician behavior change as a result of that promotion? So one of the other big disconnects is that if the campaign did not have good return on investment, sometimes the client will say, well, I don't want to continue it. Whereas there are really opportunities to further analyze that data. A couple situations that we've had or scenarios where client had about a 1-to-1 return on investment. And what we observed was that geographically, the physicians in rural and Midwest cities and areas were much less responsible, had a less than 1-to-1 ROI versus physicians in urban and coastal cities, for example, Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, had much better response to the campaign. And that insight really gave the client a good idea then of further analysis they needed to do to adjust the campaign so that it would become more effective in the Midwest as well as in the along the coast.
Assia, I'll go to you with the same question there as well. Where have you seen the biggest disconnect between PLDs with your customers from an agency point of view?
Thank you, Seth. Good afternoon. I think one key disconnect is the underutilization of PLD as a strategic signal generator. Too often it is used retrospectively to validate past performance rather than forward-looking tool to steer engagement in real time. And there is also a mismatch of granularity depending on the channels where we can have some data coming back from performance at the NPI level versus the aggregated. I also have seen operational silos that are major blockers where PLD is often buried inside the analytics team and isolated from the creative field. So that, often what we see is that brand miss the opportunity to translate individual HCP behaviors into content triggers. And there is also a widespread assumption that PLD is only is often used for postscript analysis, but there is a possibility to have a continuous optimization tool across all the entire campaign life cycle.
Fantastic. For this next one, we're going to talk a little bit about the intersection of PLD and breaking into broader data intelligence. Karin, I'm going to go to you first here. What other types of data can you integrate with PLD to help unlock the incremental value that customers want to see from it?
So that is a really big question, Seth. And that should really be driven by what the strategies and the business questions are for them. So when considering that, I think we typically think about PLD and linking it to prescription data or medical claims data to see how that campaign performed, comparing a test versus a control group, and then seeing if there was a lift in the physicians that were exposed to the campaign. So that's kind of the first step to looking at the types of data that's available. Secondarily, like Assia just mentioned, it's really important to understand some of the drivers of that campaign. And there's a lot of other types of data that can help you do that. So when considering, for example, the patient journey, some of the other types of data that we may want to consider are, number one, lab data. Many of the newer oncology medications often require genetic tests in order to start therapy, or in some cases, there are genetic tests that help define the condition in better detail. So more of our clients are often looking at lab data as an outcome metric to see if ultimately that data led to treatment with the medication or better diagnostic flow. Some of the other newer data are recorded and transcribed dictation from electronic health record. These data sets tend to be smaller and unstructured, but they really give some great insight into intent. So why was a patient started on therapy, perhaps discontinued on therapy? Why was a certain test given to a patient? All of these insights are very helpful in really understanding what worked and what didn't work in a campaign. The next data type is payer formulary data. While our clients often talk about using this and use this in pure payer analysis, they don't always use it for these types of campaign analysis. And really, we see that the campaign may have been very effective and that the doctor may have actually prescribed the drug, but the payer ended up having the product not on formulary, or it's very difficult for that physician to overcome prior authorization. So some additional payer analytics are often required to ensure that payers are not a barrier to treatment. The other great set of data is social determinants of health and consumer data.
Sorry,
yes.
Karin, just a second. I think it might be your microphone. They're getting a lot of noise feedback. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, but just want to pause here.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Yeah, thanks so much.
So the final data is, as we were talking about, social determinants of health. And this type of data is really useful in understanding some of the healthcare behaviors and limitations of the patient. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the patient as we move further into the discussion. But if the patient maybe has difficulty getting to that physician's office, or they have difficulty understanding some of the information on the disease state or treatment, that can really hinder that doctor's opportunity to treat that patient, number one, but also for that patient to remain compliant on therapy. So that summarizes some of the key types of data that are available for these types of analysis.
Love that, Karin. Thanks for that. And Assia, I'm going to touch briefly on this as far as connecting to broader intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about the DTC side of that? Karin heavily weighed in on the HCP side. Hoping you can shed some light there on the other side.
Yes, to Karin's point as well, is that we are now able to really create what I call a multi-layered health graph by integrating PLD with patient-level claims, digital engagement, behavioral intent signals, EMR data. This will allow the brand to move beyond the exposure metrics, right? To understand HCP in a context, what the patient they are seeing, what are the treatment journey they are interviewing, in what context the rep are also engaged across channels. So we do have this full holistic, what I call the health graph. This integrated view is really something that is going to give a 360 view and layer the foundational work in terms of providing the foundational data structure in order to create a little bit more predictive analytics that could be based also in patterns and behavioral patterns that have linked all these data together. We do see that the convergence, right? There is the convergence with DTC becomes more powerful because now we have really what I call a golden matrix that puts all these data signals together. So you can think also of this as not only we can add on multiple data assets or multiple data signals, the online symptom sources, the education site visits, we can add demographic overlay, but most importantly, this health graph would allow to put HCP, DTC together to really understand the journey in a more precise way, because then we can identify with precision the moment when both HCP and patients are aligned or misaligned for that matter.
I love that. We're going to drive some action here. Assia, I'm going to stay with you. What are some first steps after you're able to kind of marry those two things up? What are some of the first steps that some of the people listening here can take today to basically get more, to basically just start using that PLD more effectively?
Yes, I think one thing that we would recommend is start with orchestration, not just reporting. Build the PLD in your planning from the outset, not just from a KPI dashboard perspective and targeting and creative and of course the representative engagement. That will be starting with the orchestration in mind between HCP, DTC, the orchestration of the campaign. How are you aligning these campaigns rather than having campaigns, HCP and DTC having different campaign objectives, different, the creative need to be orchestrated in some fashion. This requires a lot of coordination operationally, but that orchestration is key, because then we have the possibility to really hone in into the ecosystem as seen by the HCP and from a point of view of the healthcare provider as well as the patient. We also, I think, use signals such as digital activities, early adoption, prescribing velocity to really define HCP cohort by behavior, right? Not just by specialties are important, but I would say within this orchestration where we have seen what we would define this ecosystem that I'm talking about, the idea would be to develop a framework, right, that is able to sustain that orchestration from two points of view. The orchestration is happening at the campaign level, right? This has to happen. Behind it, when it's supported by a data orchestration graph that is able then to support any new data that we can add on, real data, health determinant, what have you. And then you have then a structure that allows you to automate insight and to develop predictive engines on top of this.
Fantastic.
So I'd like to, I'd like to just add on to what Assia said about that. And we like to think about 5 key types of elements for your health graph, because that's really fundamental to building any type of orchestration engine. The first of which is traditional data, like Assia said. So your specialty, endocrinology versus PCP versus, maybe it's a multiple sclerosis subspecialty. Prescribing behavior, are they early adopters versus conservative prescribers versus loyalists versus splitters? That's always critical but basic information. Of course, volume and new patient starts for prescriptions, what tends to be the trends, affiliations, whether it be academic medical centers, IDNs, private practice, and location. This traditional information really forms the kind of like base foundation for some of these predictive models to be able to understand the context of that prescriber's behavior. The second, number 2, is engagement propensity. This is really, really important, and I don't see a lot of companies storing this in a way where they can access this data in any type of, not real time, but quickly. We've done projects with customers where it may take weeks or months to put all this information together, but it's really valuable to understand engagement propensity. So what that means, as you are running campaigns, to be able to standardize channels and tactics, EHR alerts, digital banners, rep calls and samples, emails, all of this data into a single repository, as Assia has suggested. The next is payer influence, which we've already discussed. And keeping that real time is important because payer formularies can change over time. Prescribers can shift their prescribing extremely quickly as a result of the introduction of a new biosimilar, for example. So being able to track that and know what's happening at any point in time is going to be critical to properly predicting a doctor or patient behavior. So that's number 3. Number 4 is peer influence and networks. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we're seeing that our clients are doing triggers and next best action at different points along the journey. So it's not only getting the doctor who is going to be the prescriber to write that brand, but it's also helping the doctor who may first see that patient, whether it be a PCP or maybe a specialist that's not a subspecialist, to be able to identify that that patient actually has the condition of interest and get them to a treating specialty. And then triggering along the patient journey. So diagnosis as well as treatment. And then the last, number 5, are physician therapeutic interests. So that can be a doctor who perhaps is treating obesity and type 2 diabetes versus just treating type 2 diabetes alone. That's one example. The patient population that doctor's seeing, are they pediatric, geriatric, Medicaid heavy? Can the patients afford the medication, or are they going to need support from pharma company assistance programs? And finally, the preferred format and channel, which goes back to engagement propensity, but this is more just knowing, where that doctor wants to receive messages, and also the sequence by which that doctor tends to be most responsive. So I would suggest that those are kind of the base foundational elements for the doctor. And then on the patient side, you want to be able to know when that patient has started medication and if that treatment is related to that physician visit, or if that doctor is even visiting that doctor or remaining compliant with the medication. So those are kind of the key metrics on both the physician and the patient side to start your journey of being able to do next best action and going from not just a reactive to more of a prescriptive approach.
Love it. We're going to get into synchronizing. Thanks for that lead in there, Karin. Stay with you here. What role do you see PLD playing in building a more connected marketing ecosystem in the next 2 to 3 years?
So I think the role of PLD is it's going to move away from being just physician level data. I think for many years, we've seen clients with marketing teams that have focused on physician level, and then a separate team focusing on patient level, which Assia will address in a little bit. But the challenge here is really being able to put all of that together and synchronize that. And if you go to the next slide is just a little example.
Yeah.
And what this shows is that there is a journey that takes place from and across the physician as well as the patient. So while the physician is treating that patient, the patient has to decide or make that decision to visit the doctor initially with their complaints. And then from there, that journey begins, whether it be with a PCP or a specialist, all the way through treatment. And so the idea here is to really coordinate and collaborate, not only omni-channel to the physician, but also to go across and coordinate and activate patients in a way that's going to facilitate that journey. In other words, the patient is going to be prepared to visit that doctor. They're going to understand their condition. They're going to understand the potential treatment and what questions to ask that doctor, and have a very productive, not only visit to the doctor, but really a productive interaction or engagement with that doctor. So both the doctor and the patient feel comfortable with treatment.
Love that. Assia, I'm going to kick it to you here. Why is it so hard to synchronize these campaigns today? What are some institutional or structural barriers that you've observed, and what can be done about them?
To what's the role for the PLD, to Karin's point also. I think PLD is fundamental to, within the 2-3 years, to 2 aspects. Real-time orchestration. These 2 keywords, right, are not happening today. and that with identity resolved infrastructures, we can really connect between exposure, engagement, outcomes, right? But I would say we have today within CMI solutions to look into these aspects already with next best action across HCP and DTC's touch point. But what we want to convey for the two, three years coming and focus on, or recommendation is to be ahead of the pack, is really to understand that I think everyone who has been working with data understand that it's not just more about data, it's really about intelligent action that the data can provide. And therefore, to your point, synchronizing what we see between synchronizing HCP and DTC campaign is an operational aspect that needs to be taken out. And the challenge that we've seen is different team, different budget, different agencies sometimes, running in parallel and not in sync. And then there are some planning that can be on isolation, and having a coordination at that level first is paramount to the success of the synchronization, and understanding also the patient journey versus the HCP. Yeah, because often we can see, okay, this is the journey, this is the HCP journey through digital channels, this is the journey of the patient, but in integrated way is important. So a unified map to fix this need of the treatment journey. I think sharing the signals across HCP and DTC audiences, as also touched by Karin, and finally a data-driven operating model that allow this omni-channel synchronous orchestration is key. So this means what? It means, if I have to summarize it, it means that rethinking the workflows, rethinking the tech stack when needed, and rethinking the KPIs as well. Because now if you are talking about the orchestration, then those KPIs that were in silos need to be remapped to really to address the health graph.
Fantastic. Okay. Push it here. Okay, let's look ahead a little bit. Karin, I'm gonna start with you, and then we'll kick it over to Assia for the same question. How can our industry shift from a reactive to a proactive approach, and then from a proactive approach to predictive?
So I think we are at the phase now, as Assia suggests, that many pharmaceutical companies have put together this data asset, or they're in the process of putting together this data asset, and they're beginning to use more sophisticated AI to build out these frameworks or graphs, as Assia suggested, to be able to really activate along the patient journey. But the one gap, or could be a gap, is that really all of the pieces need to be put together, all the way from the planning to the audience to activation through measurement. I think the one consideration is there a productionized approach? I see a lot of pharmaceutical companies now that are piecing things together. You know, they may have one company do a predictive model and then feed the data all over the place to try to get it to activate against that, and then it's difficult to measure. So is there, and can there be a productionized platform that makes this journey easier, right? Can you go from your audience to activate, as Assia said, with both physicians as well as consumers, and coordinating that activity? That's something we here at OptimizeRx do with our predictive models. We have a platform to link both the physicians as well as the consumers to activate both simultaneously, but also in a way that's gonna, I'll call it, nudge them toward, you know, the right treatment at the right time. So that's really, I think, probably one of the most critical things is productionizing that activation and engagement process.
Love that. Assia, same question.
Yes, I think if we go in terms of predictive, I think we really need to
the future will push us to go into the predictive. Today, we do see regression models, machine learning. I think the agentic AI will be a key component on how this will come to life, because we are talking about a predictive. So the predictive can be in two phases. The first one would be to really develop a true predictive engines, and then second, leverage agentic AI to really power this to the next level. And this will depend into three key components. Clean real-time data is actually the key driver for such an endover. Identity resolution across all systems is very important. And then, of course, there are a plethora of today, as everyone is talking about AI, there are plethora of engines and methods to go after the agentic AI. And I think the success will be really anchored into the execution of these agentic AI specific to the company business goal, strategy, data maturity, and the operational execution. So in my opinion, if I have to recommend, go first into predictive without the real time, then you go into the real time phase 2.
Fantastic. What are some other, you talked about agentic AI there, Assia. What are some other modern tools and applications that to be aware of in this space that could help build this foundation?
Yeah. So within today, the AI, as everybody knows, the buzzword, AI has been existing for a long time in terms of machine learning, right? So machine learning was part of the AI. When we talk about agentic, we are talking also about the generative AI, where while you are automating your workflow, so there is a lot of open source out there, and then the big, you have NVIDIA as a provider who is providing hardware where you can really take a large language model and get your data to learn, so that you can own your own large language model, or fine-tune the large language model based on the enterprise data, so that you have your proprietary information within your ecosystem. You can develop that. From the agentic workflows, you have a plethora of online of open source workflows that you can create, and there are many ones of them. But the key is really, for me, the tools are important, but also in order to be able to develop agents, I cannot stress this enough, is clean real-time data and integrating the data together in a proper way. That is not a technological exercise or a tech exercise, but the data is coordinated from the end, with the business in mind, with the end business use in mind, so that the data is not connected just with from a tech perspective. Yeah. So that's one. I think there is the scale by which you can adopt these agentic AI is also important. How are you starting to get this different agents aligned in order to be able to claim a real-time orchestration? Will require human understanding, how to stitch it together, and business involved, and then the tools to do so. But I think the tools are so abundant into the marketplace. I don't think the tools is an issue, right? It's we hear all the time about AI agent coming up. I think the key is how to link your own data to your business imperative and to your operating model. Thank you.
Awesome. Assia, you said something there, and I want to kick it to Karin here. You talked about the human element. Karin, how does the human element come in with all this this proliferation of all these agentic AI and these generative AI models and all this stuff as it's growing? How does the human element tie in?
So the human element ties in 3 ways. The first is we need the human element because agentic AI is great, but sometimes, and LLMs are great, but sometimes there are hallucinations. Sometimes AI is a little too dogmatic about what it says, something is or is not. And so you've got to correct, either add or subtract what it's saying. So you need a human eye to make sure that we're refining the prompts and also refining the information that gets put into the LLM or into the agentic AI in order for it to give better answers. There is this concept of what's called kintsugi, which is this Japanese idea that you have a data foundation here, or in this case, pottery foundation. And what Japanese kintsugi is being able to fill in the cracks of the data with either AI or human intelligence, i.e. fill in the cracks with kintsugi pottery. You see these lovely Japanese pottery, and they have painted gold leaf to put together some of the pieces of cracked pottery. And the cracked pottery, once reassembled, looks even better than the original. It's very beautiful in its unique way. And so the idea here is that the data is imperfect. While we want real-time data, and we're getting closer to that, as Assia suggests, when we resolve impressions and then link to the physician or link to the patient, sometimes we can lose data. On the patient side, you can lose anywhere between 30 and 70% of that data, so you have to fill it in some way, right? So number one, we can use agentic AI to fill in data and need that human element to make sure we prompt and edit that data properly. The second human intelligence piece of this is really being able to establish strong guidelines for the use of AI, both internally and for external tools that you may bring into your organization, and just making sure that there's training and guidance for the folks on your teams that are actually using this data. So that's a second critical element. And then the third is really around developing an infrastructure, a production infrastructure for being able to use this. When you are setting up your data asset, there are certain ways to set it up so that that data can connect via API to either LLM or agentic processes. So practically speaking, those technology considerations need to take place. So the more structured your data is, sometimes it's harder for AI to be able to interpret it. So you've got to kind of create that balance between structured and unstructured data.
Love that. Go ahead, Assia. Yeah.
Yes, I would like to add on what Karin was rightly so highlighting. I think when it comes to the AI, I think the first step is prompt engineering, but the future will require prompt engineering, yes, but then actually you can actually leverage your own LLM. You can take your LLM and vectorize your data and integrate it. And then in order to look at the ecosystem in terms of machine versus human, I think as our CEO says also, AI is here to scale you, not to scare you. So the scale of scaling, I think there's a microphone. Scaling AI, AI is here to scale you, and it's a tool. Understanding its fundamental is super important. And I would say that in order for the human feedback to come onto the AI engine, this is done by reinforcement learning that can be developed specific to pharma. Okay? Because today you have tools. Today, if you look at any LLM that is available across the spectrum, whether it's Gemini, GPT-4, or Claude or anyone, they have already integrated some reinforcement learning, meaning integrating the human feedback within the AI engine. That was done already, but it can be done for pharma, for specifically into a specific area where we have PLD, we have DTC, we have that health graph, and then we can have a reinforcement learning that is incorporating the feedback from the expert within the field.
Fantastic. I'm gonna go. We've got one question from the audience, but before that, I've got one follow-up question here. If you're watching this, feel free to drop a question in as we're answering this next one. We'd love to just see what you guys are thinking about. Karin, if you could redesign how pharma brands activate PLD or even any kind of broader intelligence from it, what would you have them do differently?
Good question. I think one of the biggest gaps, just a very, very basic gap, even before we get to predictive and prescriptive, LLMs and be able to have agentic AI, is just very simply going beyond return on investment and creating optimization models, creating that data set and using optimization models. One example is we recently worked with a client on a campaign, and we made some recommendations to them on how they could be increasing and decreasing impressions for certain channels and certain audiences. Well, it turned out that the agency actually was doing their own optimization. We're not sure exactly how, but when we ran our optimization models for the client, we saw that they needed to adjust their promotion from one form of television advertising to another. So the client was doing a lot of CTV, but their customers, or their consumers, were really heavily into cable and satellite, and therefore addressable TV would have been a better option. And so we didn't see the client actually change until the very end of the campaign, which was toward the latter part of the year, where they saw a tremendous increase in prescriptions as a result of that. So what I would suggest is just doing some of the basic blocking and tackling, being able to run optimization models earlier on so you can adjust the campaign to yield better results. So that's really the low-hanging fruit.
Love that. Assia, if you were going to have them do anything differently, same question, what would you have them do? Assia, I'm having some mic trouble on this side. Sorry.
Yes, can you hear me?
Much better. Yeah, much better.
Okay, thank you. So I think if I could design how pharma brand reactivate PLD from scratch, what we'd be doing differently is maybe, thinking about this orchestration ahead of time. And for me, it's really work backwards by defining the patient journey, then the PLD on top of it. That's what I would do. I think I would think that today we have seen with our clients, there are optimization in place. And I think the feedback loop from the optimization and what we learn from measurement from the PLD coming back into the planning and coming back into the segmentation of the audience from a PLD would be something that need to be systemic, not one-off, not the ad hoc analysis.
Love that. Okay, we're going to kick it to a question. We've had it for some time, but we were holding them for the end, so thanks for your patience here. What ROI lift have you seen when shifting from traditional to PLD-based segmentation? Is there any benchmarks or examples you can share? Karin, I'll start with you, and I'll kick it to Assia as well.
Yes. So Assia and I have been talking about predictive modeling and being able to apply that along with PLD data to do, for example, alerts or triggers based on when patients are ready for treatment. So it's really an alert based on patient readiness for therapy, but it's physician level in that it's the activation is with the physician. And it could be, through a variety of channels, primarily in this case, EHR. And keep in mind that ROI is going to vary a lot because it's not dependent only on the prediction, but it's also dependent upon a number of other factors, like the creative that's built and the amount of impressions that the customer may decide to purchase or apply to that one particular channel and tactic. But we tend to see anywhere, from 3 to 4 times ROI to an average of 10 to 20 times ROI. And sometimes, if it tends to be a more expensive specialty drug, oncology product, rare disease product, we may see ROIs as high as 50 times and above. So ROI, like I said, can vary a bit, but if you're doing, as Assia has suggested, the right data integration, planning again for predictive modeling and predictive use of AI in your advertising promotion, then oftentimes if you've done all that right, you can get really solid returns on investment.
Awesome. Assia, same question there.
I agree with Karin fully. ROIs are really coming from media mix modeling and how it's not just media, it's the creative aspect of things. So PLD segmentation helps because you are after more precise target. But when it comes to ROI, the engagement that is going through the creative is critical. So it's really a mesh of media impressions and spend and engagement and the creative engagement, as well as how PLD segment have been created and targeted, and how the personalization has occurred. So we see a good ROIs across the board so far across our brands.
Love that. We have a question actually coming in from a startup, which is pretty cool. Is there a way to harness some of the AI models to find, and this is emphasized, reliable PLD for us to use? So maybe someone looking to drive some business cases, and they're hinting on the reliability of PLD. Karin, any thoughts on that? Interesting question from a startup. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it really has to do with speaking with your vendor and making sure that if that data, like where the data comes from, what the provenance of that data is, and how that data is collected. Sometimes we have seen other vendors who model that data, whereas in our case, we receive that data, we tag every impression, it gets attached to an MPI, and then because that impression is tagged, we get that tagged impression back, which is attached to the same MPI. So in our case, it's like a one-to-one of what the physician is actually exposed to from the advertising campaign and what we get back. That may not be the case in every situation. Sometimes you won't get the full PLD back. So it's really a conversation with your vendor and making sure you understand the provenance and reliability of that data and how that data is collected.
Fantastic. Assia, any additional thoughts there?
Not really, because they are said to, I think I don't have anything to add past Karin's. I think she answered it very well. I mean, completely aligned with it. I don't see what I can add.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that was helpful. I would encourage you to reach out. We'll have a slide actually coming up next. Please feel free to reach out directly to Karin or I to talk about any questions you have on activating your PLD. And that goes for, we have a good mix here. Yep. Maybe the last thing, what do you Assia and Karin, what are you guys most excited about, kind of on the horizon? What are some things that you're working towards? Assia, you talked about a move that you've really spent, CMI spent the time with their customers building a foundation of PLD and getting into predictive. You just talk a little bit about that. And then Karin, I'll kick it to you as well to just chat a little bit about some of the things that are on the horizon here.
We have first of all, we created a personalization engine that is called AMO today, that is really fully automated and powered by AI and machine learning, that allows to serve the leverage PLD and leverage the HCP segments as well, in order to serve the HCP the right message at the right time. We are also developing one for the HCP, for the patient as well. And then as we are moving into the AI realm, we do have actually this week an AI tech tour done by our CTO and our tech team, where we are looking at integrating AI across the different aspects of our business. Very excited about what we are doing there. Within the predictive, we're starting slowly into a pilot. So we are at CMI integrating AI in every piece of it, from an audience perspective to the planning, as well as within the activation, as well as the measurement. So more to come on that as our products going to the market.
Fantastic, Assia. Karin?
So I come from Medix, which is the consumer audience and activation company, which was acquired by OptimizeRx. And I am very, very excited about the combination of both of our assets, which has come together over the last year and a half, because we have a fully integrated platform where we're able to activate physicians and be able to identify when a patient is brand ready. We say brand ready, and that can mean a variety of things, but brand ready, ready for treatment, or ready to be diagnosed in many cases. And those models are custom created by our AI team and then put into production in a way where we can activate both the physician as well as that patient, in order to ensure that the patient and the physician come together for the best opportunity to increase the likelihood that that patient ultimately will get the brand of interest. So that is super exciting. Our patient activation, which is called micro-neighborhood targeting, which is integrated with our DAP platform, allows, in a privacy-safe way, patients to be activated not individually, which is a no-no, but within micro-neighborhoods or zip 9 areas. So if we activate everyone in that zip 9 area, the household plus that small geography, then, you know, the individual person's not getting the ad, but we're making sure that most of the patients that are actually eligible are linked to that doctor, or nearly all the patients that are eligible, plus a privacy-safe scaling, are going to be activated in addition to that physician. So that's super exciting. The other thing that we're doing, which is very cool, which I'm part of, is, as Assia was talking about, I think both of our organizations are heading toward greater use of AI. We're beginning to use AI in an agentic way to help profile and segment patients as well as physicians, and be able to use that for more informed media buys, as well as more informed development of creative and messaging. So really aligning the planning with the actual activation and collection of data onto AI and predictive modeling.
Fantastic. We actually had a question come in, Karin, as you were responding to that. I'll read it off to you. Do you explore physician behavior in response? I kind of know the answer to this one because of our collaboration on the white paper. Do you explore physician behavior in response as part of the patient journey and or doctor referral networks? Karin, I'll stay with you for that.
Yes, we have done both. In fact, on the referral network piece, we have worked more recently, I would say in the last 6 months or so, with medical departments or medical organizations within the pharmaceutical company. As you're aware, they can't focus on conversion, but they're focused on informing doctors, you know, on some of the benefits of the the product and the science around that product or the condition of interest. And so we're using these kinds of tools and platforms and proceed along that journey by triggering or alerting doctors that are not just the treaters, but again, are the referrers or maybe those initial doctors that are beginning to see that patient with those symptoms during.
Gotcha. I'll put a quick plug on that as well. If you look at in the structure of the white paper, if you check out measurement frameworks, we start to get into analyzing response across channels, and then you can see the behavior and what's really driving that response. That really helps to start diving in, as well as feel free to reach out if you want to have an expanded conversation on what we do there as far as the behavior and the response. That is all the questions that we have for now, unless anyone wants to drop in any one last second. I'll give kind of 10, 15 seconds for someone to drop a final question in. Okay. Doesn't look like anything's coming in. I would just like to say thanks to everybody who attended today, probably a lot during their lunchtime. Please check out resources for the white paper, or you can also download it directly from the OptimizeRx site. I want to thank specifically Assia for joining Karin and I to co-present this session, and as well as the Fierce Pharma team. Reach out with any questions. Here's our emails here. We'll keep that on. And thank you guys. Appreciate the time.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar. That is all the time that we do have for today. If we were not able to answer your question, we will do our best to follow up following today's webinar. As a reminder, a recording of this session will be available on demand within 24 hours. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.